Going live in 3, 2, 1.
Welcome everyone to getting started in conference speaking. Glad to have those back who joined the morning session that I did on mentoring, and welcome to the rest of you who I haven't talked to yet today. This topic really kind of narrows in on getting started in the conference speaking realm, but it really goes beyond that. So it also includes getting more comfortable with public speaking, as well as becoming a more effective communicator, because realistically you can't get to the conference speaking side of things without the other two. So the application here is fairly broad. So if you want to start talking at user groups, if you just want to do a better job when you're presenting systems to your user community or to your technical team at your company, or maybe you're doing a lunch and learn or something like that. Really, everything we talk about here is largely going to apply. So I'm glad you all chose to join me today. So real quick, thanks to our sponsors, JetBrains, Waste Management, JP Morgan Chase, Microsoft, Grape City, and of course, Improving, who I work for. Just a few quick items, interesting things going on around Improving. We are hiring, even in the midst of our current economic situation. We are looking for front-end devs, senior level .NET developers, as well as full stack devs. So if you are interested in making a career change, please reach out to me after the event, or go to our website and apply. So it's a pretty cool place to work, which hopefully will come through in some of the things we talk about today. Also, we do lunch and learns every Friday on 12 p.m. Central Standard Time. I did one this past Wednesday on AWS Lambda, but we do them on a variety of topics. So it's free, it's virtual. So you can check out the schedule on improving.com and see if there's something coming up that might be interesting to you. And finally, we do training at Improving, mostly around project management and project management certification type things. So for everyone at Techfest who is interested in taking a class, we have a $500 off coupon code for Tech-Fest-2020 to take advantage of that offer for our virtual training. So if you are in the market, please check it out. So let's get started here. My name is Mark Runyon. As I've said, I am with Improving. I am out of our Atlanta office, and a lot of other improvers are here today from Houston presenting. So hopefully you have caught some of their sessions or will in the next hour. I am a writer for Information Week, as well as the Enterprisers Project. I focus on things around IT management, app dev, the cloud, and recently artificial intelligence. So if you are interested in AI, I do have an article coming out this coming week for Information Week around the limitations around machine learning and AI. So things for the C-level folks to be aware of if they're looking to implement AI solutions. I am the technical lead on a team of 12 at my current client account, and I also run the App Dev in the Cloud meetup, and we have a pretty cool speaker coming up on October 1st. A data and AI architect from Microsoft is going to come talk to us about Azure Cognitive Services, so basically using AI within your applications. So that should be a pretty cool session. So definitely check that out if you are up for it. I put a link in the slide deck, which I'll share after the talk. And pertaining to what we're talking about today, what are my creds? Why am I talking to you? And what gives me authority in this space? So I have presented at many conferences, user groups, and company events. This is actually I think it's my 6th talk within the last conference talk within the last 4 months. So one of the really nice things about virtual is it opens up your possibilities. So I've talked in Salt Lake City and Iowa City and Atlanta and now Houston. I've got Memphis coming up in 2 weeks, and then hopefully Portland, at the end of October. So lots of places you can potentially dive in, which is a huge plus if you're trying to get involved in the space and really start to find out what conference speaking is all about. So let's go ahead and get into it. Our agenda for today is to look at sort of the life cycle of a speech, whether it be a conference speech or maybe one you're giving for a user group or whatever else. So we start out with our intense preparation on the front end to make sure that when we get into it, we have basically all of our ducks in a row, and to kind of quell the nerves and stuff that come along with it. Our sort of pre-game ritual that kind of prepares us for going into the main event, the actual delivery, and what I call the relief phase of that was a lot of work. There was a lot of prep involved, and there was lots of nerves rattling around, but I made it to the other side, and it feels awesome to have accomplished that great goal and to have delivered a successful talk. So that is our path today. So let's go ahead and look at our first slide, which is all the reasons that you can't do it, whether it be you have a mental thing in your head that the only people that talk at conferences are Microsoft MVPs or people that write technical books. It could be the fact that you don't think that you have anything interesting to say, or maybe the thought of standing in front of a room scares the bejesus out of you. That's going to be a lot of people out there. So, and what if somebody asks me a question that I don't know? I'm afraid of looking like an idiot. That these are all valid things, and they're all things standing in the way of you becoming a conference speaker or talking in front of your team or what have you. So we're going to address all these things today and try to knock down all these roadblocks so that you don't really have any more excuses as to why you can't do these things. You can tell yourself that you can get through all of this. And the first point is the only thing that isn't brought up today. And I will tell you, I am not a Microsoft MVP. I don't write technical books. I do write articles around technical topics, but that's more because I like to write more so than I'm some technical savant. That's definitely not the case. So there's really nothing standing in your way. There's no credentials they're checking at the door to make sure that you are the expert in said field, and thus you are allowed to talk to this audience. It's more about passion. It's more about I have a drive to speak and to share, and that's really kind of the key behind it. So the first thing we have to ask ourselves before we really get too deep into our topic is, who is our audience, and are they there by their own free will? So when I say that, I'm not implying that you're chaining people to their chairs and forcing them to listen to you talk. Your feedback scores will probably be pretty poor if that's the case, but it's more around, is this a sort of a willing audience? And the non-willing audience is, we've all been there. Say we're coming upon the end of 2021, and we're all going to have to probably go through a day or two of yearly planning for the upcoming year for our department to figure out what direction we're going and what systems we're going to be working on, and what our vision looks like. And those are painful events. I know by experience that they're kind of all-day events. They buy you lunch, they kind of bribe you to be there and be happy, but it's kind of a tough room to talk to because half the people are falling asleep, half the people don't want to be there. So that approach is going to be a little bit differently than if, say, you're talking to a conference where somebody has opted in to be in your session and they're really interested about your topic. So, and two, who is your audience? So with, say, if you're talking to your team, it's a fairly friendly audience. They all know you. They all know your skill sets. And if you flub something up, it's not the end of the world. They might rib you about it later, but it's not anything to be terribly worried about. If you're talking at a conference, you probably don't know the people in the audience, and so you kind of have to bring your A game and make sure that you have everything prepared and all your ducks in a row to make sure you're putting your best face forward in that situation. So depending on your audience and their sort of willingness or not to be there is going to reflect how we approach this talk. So our first thing is our topic selection. How would I even know what to talk about? So I hear this a lot from running, our internal app dev community within Improving, as well as our external community. When I approach people and say, hey, I know you're working on some cool stuff. Would you like to talk with one of the communities coming up? And I get this, oh, I'm not doing anything interesting. It's like, but you are. It's like we all have a story to tell, and we all have a voice. So are we tapping into that voice, or are we just telling ourselves, what I'm doing is boring. It's not worth anybody's time. It really is. you have to kind of get down to, what is this thing that interests me more than anything else? Because if it interests you, then largely it will interest who are the audiences you're talking to. So the way I look at it is, interview yourself. Write down, 3 cool things that you've worked on in the past month. If your job is super boring, you might want to do something about that, but go back a year and say, okay, what are the things that I was really passionate about that really kind of charged me up when I heard I was going to be working on this new feature? I was like, oh, that's awesome. I can't wait to dig into that. Those are great topics for a potential talk. And then secondly, ask yourself, what are the tech projects you've worked on in the past that you were really proud of? What made those memorable, and why did they really stand out in your mind? What made them resonate? So again, you're really looking for those things that you're passionate about and that really stand out to you, and that your emotion and your personality can come out when you're talking about them. I have a colleague, he works on a Python Bitcoin predictor. He shows it off, and you can tell he's really charged up about it and really into it. And that's cool. That's one of his little passion side projects. That's an awesome thing for him to talk about, because you can tell the energy behind it, and it's infectious. The audience really digs in and wants to try it out and do it for themselves. And then lastly, you don't have to be an expert in the topic that you're picking. So maybe it's something that you're really interested in, and this is an awesome excuse to do a deep dive into it and to really know it inside and out. That's a perfectly valid way to approach this as well. So depending on where you're at, there's a few different ways you can approach that topic selection. And from experience, I will say, if you can, it makes sense if you're presenting at a conference to give them 2 or 3 options for topics, so that there are times when maybe somebody else is speaking on this topic. I've presented this topic to many conferences, and this was actually the first one that took me up on it. I'll be giving this topic again in Memphis in 2 weeks, but largely this is a topic that gets presented a lot by other people. So maybe they've already seen somebody else give this talk and they really liked it, so okay, we're going to go with them. Or maybe they're like, well, that topic's been done to death and we don't want to present that to our audience anymore. So so it's not about you. It's not a reflection on you given a bad topic. It's more like there's other things going on in the equation, and unfortunately you just kind of fell into the topic that doesn't get used. So by giving them 2 or 3 to choose from, you give them flexibility to say, well, this topic's interesting, it's not for us, but we'd love to go with topic number 3, that kind of thing. So keep that in mind when you're applying. And also, if you have conferences that you're looking to speak at, put those dates on the calendar way ahead of time, because they usually have submission deadlines, usually a couple months in advance or a month in advance. And so you want to make sure you have all your stuff planned, so that you get your submissions in time, so you don't miss the deadlines and miss out on what could be providing a great talk at a conference you really want to present at. So next, we want to tell a story. So there was a Stanford study done by Bauer and Clark that found that subjects recall 6 to 7 times the information when it was constructed into a narrative. So that's a 93% versus a 13%. 6 times more information is retained. So just by doing the simple step of constructing a storyline around your content can make it that much more impactful and have it resonate with your audience, so that they don't walk out of the room and forget, that was an interesting talk, but I don't remember anything you talked about, or it didn't really make the impact that I thought it would, that kind of thing. So the way I approach things is, first thing, once I've narrowed down that topic, I'll brainstorm on it. I'll just get everything out of my head. I may have to go research a few things to fill in some gaps, but more or less just a brain dump of here's all the information that I want to provide. At that point, I'll arrange it into a logical flow to have the story narrative from beginning to end. And then I'll go back through and sort of take it step by step and say, okay, does this flow work? Is there a problem, back here that we need to fill in a gap so to bridge this topic to this topic? And it usually kind of shows you where the flaws are in your overall content and helps you kind of fill in those blanks. So it's kind of a really nice way to approach it. And then at the end, chunk that content up into 3 to 8 bullet points, and then create your slides from that. So really what you're going for is to do that nice, smooth transitions, trying to get all the choppiness out of it and really have a nice flow from beginning to end. So when you're assembling your slide deck, there's a few things to keep in mind. First and foremost, professionalism. We want to make sure that this is a deck that we're comfortable presenting to really any audience, whether it be our coworkers or to the CEO of a company or really whoever we could potentially be delivering this to, or could be unknowingly watching this this presentation. So we want to do things like have consistent fonts, faces, and sizes, muted color schemes, contrast. We don't want our slides should never hurt anybody's eyes. You don't have lime green background on with yellow font. Your slide should never look like a ransom letter. From one slide to the next shouldn't look like I'm in a completely different slide deck. There should be that consistency all the way through and in that nice professional vibe. Again, your slides should show a cohesive whole from beginning to end. There should never be I feel like I'm jumping around and I'm not entirely sure what's going on. The slide should not be a distraction. If you're using images and videos, make sure they reflect the audience. So if I'm presenting to my coworkers, I might throw in, say, some funny videos or some memes or something to lighten the mood to give it a little extra humor. But if I'm presenting to, say, the CEO or the CIO of my client, I'm probably going to shy away from that kind of stuff because it's just not relevant. It's going to come off the wrong way. It could detract from my message. So we want to make sure that whatever's there is complementing whatever we're talking about and not ever taking away from our talk. The good way to think about your slide deck is, say we're at a dinner and someone's getting an awards dinner, and basically the topic is our guest of honor. You are the master of ceremonies. Our slide deck is the decorations. So in that instance, the decorations are never going to jump out and be the focal point of the evening. They're just there to make sure everything else looks good and that everything goes off smoothly without a hitch. And that's what your slide deck should be. It should always be a complement and never the thing that steals the show, good or bad for that matter. Always take the less is more approach. So we don't want to pack information into our slides and have it, detract from what we're saying. We don't want everybody focused on our slide deck and not looking at us. Our slide deck is not the focal point of the conversation. We don't want them reading, minute details off the slides. If all those minute details need to go to your notes section, and that's really your focal point. If you need to go back to, it's like I've lost my train of thought and I need to get back on target, and thus you can read your notes and catch back up and then launch back in. So. But don't burden your audience with that extra stuff that's just there. So take time to inject humor and personality into your talk. Nothing's worse than having that, what is it, Ben Stein moment in Ferris Bueller, where he's just droning on monotonously and everybody's falling asleep or they're totally disinterested, and you can tell he lost the room basically the moment they walked in the door because they knew what they were going to get. Your goal here is to talk like you're talking to a friend. Use variations in tone and an approach so that nobody is, you're not losing your audience and you're not putting them to sleep. The goal here is to connect with your audience, put them at ease, and make them comfortable. This really is, at the end of the day, about them and what they can learn and what they're getting out of this experience. It's not about you. So we're doing things to help facilitate that easiness, that comfort, those sort of things. And by using your personality and inflections and things of that nature, that becomes a lot easier. Humor is a tougher one, I have to say. For some people, it comes really easily, and you don't have to pre-package your humor, and you can just roll them out on the fly. You're quick-witted. I've never been that person myself, so more or less when I approach it, it's more of, okay, let's put this in here and see if it works. Let's try to deliver it to an audience that's a little bit more forgiving, and if this thing bombs out, then I know I know I need to replace it and find something else that will fit in there. But the key with humor is it can lighten the mood, it can bring the audience back in, and it can, when used correctly, it can be a nice helpful aid to push the talk along and to really drive home some points and to, like I say, lighten the situation and really pull the audience back in. So one of the most important things, I think, is the dry run. So you've created your slide deck, you've put in a ton of great content, you've assembled a great talk, but you haven't delivered the talk yet. So there's no guarantee that everything that's on your slides is actually going to translate over to your audience, not until you deliver it. So with that said, the way I approach it is to start working on your presentation at least, I'd say, 3 weeks ahead of time and have it complete by the week before. So you have the entire last week to focus on doing dry runs and really trying the content out and making slight tweaks and seeing where stuff doesn't work and really putting that necessary polish on it so that when you hit the final presentation, that it's something you're really comfortable with, something you're proud of, and something that delivers well. So when you put together a slide deck and you've done this brain dump of all this stuff in your head, even though you've kind of constructed it right and how you want to approach it, it rarely comes out as smoothly as you think it would the first go around. So that first time around is just to kind of get the choppiness out of it and to smooth things out and get that jumble of thoughts out of your head, so to make the audience ready. There's an interesting study done back in the 60s where personal communication was found to be 38% voice, 55% nonverbal communication, and only 7% content. So if we look at those numbers, what's actually in the presentation has much less impact than how you deliver it. So my suggestion, how I've approached it, is to record yourself so that you can watch it back and see, are there any weird nervous tics that I'm bringing to the equation that are taking away from my talk? If you're totally uncomfortable taping yourself, just deliver it in front of a mirror so you can kind of see yourself as in real time and see, I need to be aware that I've been saying like every 2 seconds. So that's something that I need when I'm in the event. I need to pull back and see if I can do less of that. And just that awareness is kind of key. So having kind of seeing yourself in real time can help you alleviate some of these nonverbal and weirdness that you're bringing to the table that you may not even realize. So it's very helpful. Also, try to present your talk in front of a small group or even one person before you actually give it to your final conference audience. And the goal here is that group should be able to be very honest with you and provide real actionable feedback. If they are just like, oh yeah, that was great, good job, and don't really tell you anything that was wrong, then that really didn't do anything for you. The goal here is to have things that you can work on, you can improve, and make that talk better before you actually get to D-Day. And I found free pizza is a great incentivizer to get people to come help you out. But the key here is just for those that are worried about the nerves and being afraid of public speaking, the preparation is key. If you practice like ad nauseum and you go into this thing with it basically memorized in your head and you have it down, then there's going to be less to go wrong. There's going to be less to worry about. That you may have some initial jitters, but once you get into that first 5-10 minutes, you realize I've got this. This is not. I don't really have anything to be worried about. We'll get to the fear part of it a little bit later, but we will echo back to the preparation is key to getting a hold of your fear and not letting your anxiety get the better of you in that situation. Technical difficulties. I actually have a story on this one. My first talk was for the Atlanta Code Camp at Kennesaw State, which is about an hour from my house. And so I was the first session of the day. I had a video in my presentation, which I wasn't quite sure how it was going to work with the audio system in the classroom. So I wanted to make sure I got there with plenty of time to spare so I could go there and test it out. And worst case scenario, just pull that slide out of the deck. So I get down there, I give myself like 2.5 hours to get there. So I get there with like an hour, hour and a half to spare. So I go to the classroom and the organizer told me to bring a HDMI connector. Well, they didn't tell me that I needed a female HDMI connector. So I'm sitting there with a male connector, looking at another male connector, thinking, oh crap, this is not going to work. And I'm one of those weirdos with a Mac, so I can't just go out and say, does anybody have a USB-C connector to female HDMI? I'm gonna hit a wall of deaf ears out there. So I'm in trouble at this point. It looks like I'm not going to be able to project this this presentation or my demo for that matter. So get the AV guy in Kennesaw State. He's shrugging his arms. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to help you, man. So I go into problem solving mode. I download the deck off of my personal website that I had available for the audience for Twitter. Get it on the local machine. The AV guy installs Visual Studio, puts the AWS toolkit on there so we can do the demo, like a reduced version of the demo. And we pull this thing in with like 15 minutes to spare. But think about it, if I had shown up with 30 minutes to spare, the talk wouldn't have happened. It wouldn't have gone off. So you have to expect that things aren't necessarily going to go your way, technically speaking, and you have to prepare for that. It could be the internet's down. It could be your laptop doesn't start. You may have a bad connector like I did. There's so many projectors shot. There's so many different things that could happen the day of that you weren't expecting, that you have to physically in your mind counteract that and say, okay, well, if this happens, do I need to bring a second laptop? Do I need to print out my slides in case I have to whiteboard the thing to get through this? Prepare for all those unexpected events, and you'll be better off than 80% of the other speakers that are there. But to the whiteboard conversation, I mean, think that through. If you had to whiteboard your conversation or your talk, could you do it? It takes a little extra level of thinking, but it can make all the difference in the world if disaster happens and you actually have to do that. Dealing with a fear. A lot of people have phobias around public speaking. I mean, a lot. We're talking 73% of the population. So to put that in perspective, more people have a phobia of public speaking than of spiders, of heights, and even death. So I don't know that I necessarily buy the last one, that more people are more scared of getting up in front of and talking in front of people rather than dying, but it's a pretty telling number. And I'm sure there's a lot of people here that have that same fear. So what do we do to get past that fear? First, we need to understand it. What is underlying that fear? It's a fear of judgment and of negative evaluation from others. From an evolutionary context, academic researchers have looked at it and said, being a part of a group in caveman times would have meant your survival. And if you were ostracized or rejected from that group, then it could have dire consequences on your ability to keep living. So that thought of this could definitely have come into play as a valid phobia scenario back in the day. Not that it really helps us out much these days. So we have to power through. We have to fight it. So what is happening with your body when this fear response just takes hold and kind of just the anxiety just grips you? Basically, it's that fight or flight mechanism kicking in. So the adrenaline flows in the bloodstream, putting the body on high alert. Blood pumps into the muscles, causing us to react, and our breathing becomes very fast and shallow. So of all those things in that list, there's only one we can really do anything about, which is our breathing. We can consciously slow ourselves down and, take a 5-second breath through our nose, hold it for 5 seconds, and then breathe out for 5 seconds. And then just keep doing that until we see ourselves starting to calm down and starting to get control of this anxiety that has really got us in a vice grip. It's a great mechanism for coming to terms with that fear. Also, visualization exercises can help, both the positive and the negative. So see yourself delivering a great talk, see yourself engaging with your audience and having success. Also visualize the negative side of things. So what if somebody asks you a question that you don't know? What if you forget, where you're at in the presentation? The nice thing about the negatives is once you kind of stack up that list of all the things that I'm afraid could go wrong, you can now counteract them and put in measures in place before you ever get there to say, okay, I've got this. I know what to do in those situations, and thus you kind of take away their power and make this a feasible thing for you to do. And just from a psychological standpoint, how psychologists deal with phobias is through repetition and desensitization therapy. So for me, I am scared of needles. It's always been one of my things. And so for my condition, I find that when I have to get shots more regularly, whether it be a surgery or a physical or whatever else, then it becomes easier each new time that I have to go do it. But if I go several months without getting a shot, then that phobia just ramps back up again, and it's hard to do. So as a treatment type scenario, I would look at pictures of shots and then maybe watch a YouTube video of somebody getting a shot and slowly make my way towards actually physically getting a shot. So we're continually desensitizing that event. So with public speaking, the best way to desensitize is to give more talks. I had a very, very much a fear of speaking in college, and I became initiate advisor of our honors fraternity without really thinking through what was going to be entailed through that. Lots of public speaking. I had to talk at every meeting. I had to run events. It was a big part of that role. And so while those first few meetings scared the heck out of me, by the time I was on meeting 5 or 6, it's like, this is just second nature. There's no, this power that the power of the fear that has over me with public speaking, it has no power anymore. There's nothing to it. There's nothing physically grounding out this fear. And by doing it a lot, you see that. So unfortunately, the best way to get a handle on it is just to start becoming a pro at speaking at conferences, speaking in front of user groups, whenever you get the chance. And to wrap this up, there's a great quote by Eleanor Roosevelt, a very cool lady in her time, and very much a fountain of knowledge, who said, "You gain courage, strength, and confidence by every experience in which you stop and look fear in the face. You are able to say to yourself, I have lived through this horror, and I can take the next thing that comes along. You must do that thing which you cannot do." So facing our fears and really overcoming them. Connecting with the audience. I have to say, this is the most challenging part about doing a virtual talk, is that I can't do this. I can't see that you're all hooked into what I'm saying. I can't see that the content is making an impact with you, and I can't make those small adjustments along the way to do better. And that's the one huge drawback of a virtual talk that you wouldn't have necessarily if you were face to face. We'll get to that as our last slide of the benefits and drawbacks of a in-person versus a virtual talk. But this is one that's really hard and difficult to deal with, and really important for your talk as a whole. So normally you can lose 90% of your audience in that first 5 minutes of the presentation. So it's up to us to draw them in, to get that engagement and keep them engaged. So when I have an audience of under 25 people, my aim is to make eye contact with everybody in the room at least once within that first 5 to 10 minutes to make that connection, try to instill that comfort within them, and to draw them into whatever I am saying. Eye contact is very important. If it's over 25, then you're scanning the room, you're doing what you can. At that level of a talk, you're kind of in a different place. But again, you're constantly trying to lock in with the audience. Don't read your slides. This is a massive one I had an issue with when I first started doing conference talks and talks in general, of let me use the slide deck as my crutch. It's there and it's an easy thing to latch onto. It's a nice life preserver. But what happens is when you use when you keep looking at your slide deck and keep focusing on it, then your entire room is now focused on the slide deck. They're not focused on you. And that's a problem because, again, as we said before, we've now made the slide deck our focus and not ourselves. So they really need to resonate on you, and your slides should be a compliment to you. So try not to fall into that habit if you can. Incorporate interesting stories and relevant stories, and relevant being the key. If you have a certain slide that, just like the one we just saw about the technical difficulties, presenting a story kind of brings that slide home to show you, oh yeah, I never really thought about that, but maybe I do need to take the extra email out to the conference organizer and say, I know you said an HDMI connection, but was that a male connection or a female connection? It really just kind of drives home the point of, yeah, this could really happen, and how would I handle that if I was in that situation? So it can really help solidify whatever your content is and make it that more memorable. Ask questions. So something I like to do is, and hopefully it's shown up, is to dovetail back to something else we've talked about and to try to reinforce it and to bring it back into focus, so that hopefully by the end of the presentation, you have a few real solid takeaways. It's like he kept talking about this, so this must really be important. So by asking questions, it's a nice little tool to bring your audience back into focus. If you feel like you're losing them, you can be like, remember on that last slide we talked about that your talk was only 7% about your content. What were the other two pieces that we were talking about there? So it jogs the audience's memory. Somebody usually, hopefully, raises their hand and chimes in, and then again, we've brought the audience's focus back into our content and into our slide, and we've also reinforced the importance of that last point that we were making, so that the audience kind of walk away with that and be like, okay, well, this was fairly important. I needed to remember that. It is a nice tool. With pacing, we're not talking about wearing a hole in the carpet from back and forth. We're talking about making sure that you fill this time allotted. You don't go over time, but you also don't bring that thing in 30 minutes. So make a conscious effort to pause after thoughts and really allow that last thought to sink in. A lot of times when people are talking for the first time, they may deliver the talk, do dry runs at home, they bring it in 40 to 50 minutes, right smack dab where they were planning on delivering it, but then they get in the conference situation and then they race through it from beginning to end, and they're like, oh my gosh, I finished with 30 minutes. Nobody wants to have a 30-minute Q&A session. Your audience certainly doesn't, and you certainly don't either. So, and the other problem with that is you've delivered this content in 45 minutes, but in a normal circumstance, but now you've delivered in 30 minutes. So that tells me your words are tripping over themselves and you're just trying to get everything out as quickly as possible. And chalk it up to nerves. It's going to happen. But if you're conscious of it and you're aware of it going into it, you can kind of put the brakes on yourself and back off and say, okay, let's consciously try to make a stop here. Let's really utilize our pauses to make sure that this content is coming out the way I intended it and not the way that my nerves wanted to dish this thing up to the audience. I find a water bottle can be a great instrument to help. one, your throat's getting dry talking for an hour anyways, so it's a nice thing to have there. And two, consciously you're saying to yourself, okay, I'm gonna drink half this water bottle from the beginning to the end. So it forces you to kind of make those stops and to pause at times and allow the audience to catch up with what you're talking about. Also along this topic is just the economy of language, of trying to, and I am a work in progress in this, I will be the first one to tell you, but it is something that as a speaker, we all need to get better at. So things like removing and so, all right, these are all pause words. That's really what they are. Your brain is trying to catch up with your mouth, and it's just inserting something to get you over to the other side. And they have no real place within your speech other than to kind of clutter it up and make you look a little bit less professional. So as a goal, again, having that awareness, we need to try to extract those out. And so it makes our speech sound much cleaner and much more professional. Here's a fun one for a lot of people as well, the questions at the very end. So a lot of people have this feeling of, I took a whole lot of time preparing all of this content for you guys, but you want to talk about this stuff over here. It's not really fair. And to a degree it's not, but usually it does trigger other thoughts. So it's like, well, we want to go talk about this stuff over this additional content. And that's fair. Everybody has their own thing. So instead of viewing questions as a negative, view them as a positive. So questions can help you fill in the blanks of maybe where you've left certain information out of your talk and how you could make your talk better. So after each talk that I give, I take the questions that were offered and try to integrate them back into the talk and fortify it and really make it stronger. So use them as a device, kind of as feedback for how you can make the talk better in case you do present this again in the future. And guess what? It's okay to say, I don't know. You didn't create whatever technology this is that you are presenting. You are just kind of the guide to let's explore this and let's find out more about this. And by saying I don't know, is your audience doesn't expect you to be the all-knowing creator on whatever this topic is that you're speaking of. It's okay. Usually how I will approach it is you can kind of guarantee that whenever you're having a talk, there's going to be a small subset of the audience that knows a little bit about that talk already. Maybe they're trying to find out additional information or grow that skill set. So a nice thing to do is just kind of throw it back to the audience. It's like this, thank you for your question. It's not something that I have personally dealt with, and I haven't explored that side of things, but potentially somebody else in here has. So does anybody else have any opinion on this or can offer any insights? So that's perfectly a valid thing to throw it back to the audience and let others kind of chime in and give their thoughts and opinions on it. Ultimately, if nobody knows, it's perfectly okay just to say I'd love to help you find out more about that. I'm happy to research it, and let's connect offline after the event, and we can discuss it more. That way you can have more traction with the audience. You're very open and upfront that unfortunately this is just not something that you're aware of, and you're not trying to BS your way through it, because the problem with BSing your way through it is, unfortunately, or invariably, there's going to be somebody in the audience that is going to call you out on it and be like, no, I'm sorry, that's not the way this works. And then you're really kind of getting yourself in a bad situation. So just be honest, be upfront, and the nice thing about preparing and over preparing is there's less questions that can get past you once you get to the end. So, and then finally, congratulations, you have, at that point you've delivered a successful talk. And as nerve-wracking as they are and as much preparation goes into them, it feels awesome to be on the other side of it. It feels like you've got all that adrenaline going in your system, and it feels like you can leap tall buildings in a single bound. It's a great feeling, and it's a good accomplishment. As Eleanor Roosevelt said, we have faced our fear, and we did something that we thought we couldn't do. So we have really conquered. We've gone outside of our comfort zone, and we have conquered something that previously we thought was kind of undoable. So it's a great accomplishment, and view it as such, and build off of that. Don't just say this is a one and done kind of thing, and I'm going to call it a day here. After that first conference that I delivered at, I went home and I was looking for new conferences that I could potentially speak at. I was jazzed. I was into this. This is cool. This is something I want to get really good at, and so feed that feeling and keep trying to give back and to present more and to make this part of your skill set, your repertoire. There was a statistic actually on the first slide that I meant to mention, but I think it was 10% those who had conquered this skill, or who had not conquered this skill, they had 10% of failure to be promoted, and it was found to hinder their career. So by conquering this and getting really good at it, it puts you sort of heads and above your coworkers and able to do something that not a whole lot of other people can do. So I definitely recommend kind of leaning into this as one of your key skills that you work on. Finally, we've hit the finish line. We're done, but you're not quite done. I always recommend doing a postmortem after your talk to get a handle on what went right, what went wrong, where can you improve, sort of parade out your successes and learn from your mistakes, and whether it be improving this current talk so that when you give it in the future, it's better, or what did you do as a speaker that could have been improved? By taking that little extra time to identify those 2 or 3 things where you can improve, it helps you grow as a speaker and helps you constantly get better. And that's what we should all be shooting for. Again, if we had questions that came up, can we integrate them into this talk in the future? Does that make sense? Does it make sense to, fortify it and make it better? Did we get audience feedback? That's from personal experience. I can say that doesn't happen a lot for whatever reason. But when you do, is it actionable? Is it constructive? Is it something that maybe somebody's identified a nervous habit that I do all the time? So thank you for bringing that to my attention. I can be aware of it, going into the next talk or for future talks. Say we're delivering a talk for our coworkers. Do we find that there's one coworker that tends to give us a lot of resistance for whatever reason? That's a great thing to know going into our next meeting with the team, that I really need to prepare for that guy, and maybe I need to start thinking through what potential problems could he bring up, or what roadblocks is he going to put in my presentation that I need to be prepared for. So again, preparation. Remember, preparation is key, and the more we can do on the front end before we ever start this talk to combat the problems we're going to have during the talk is makes your life so much easier and makes things go so much smoother. So our final slide today, or at least our final real slide for the day, is this idea of virtual versus live and in person. So one of my goals for myself this year was to get better at this, to do more conference talks and to get better at public speaking as a whole. And so with that goal in mind, I was kind of mapping out conferences that were in the greater Atlanta area, up to Chattanooga, and easy places to get to on a quick day trip, and to see where I could plug in and participate. And there's problems with that, obviously. There's only so many you can do within a driving range. You're a little bit bound without making, organizing trips and vacations around your speaking engagements. One of the really nice things about COVID, when it came along, which I didn't foresee at the time, was all the conferences would be going virtual since nobody really could meet, those that didn't cancel, that is. So there's all these new opportunities that have opened themselves up that weren't there before. So again, in the past 4 months, I've been in Salt Lake City, Atlanta, Iowa City, Houston today, Memphis in 2 weeks, hopefully Portland at the end of October. There's lots and lots of opportunities out there. It's just a matter of tapping into them and taking advantage of the ones that are out there. So that's the good of virtual. The bad, we just discussed a few slides ago, of the engagement. I can't see your faces. I can't tell if this content is connecting with you or if it's falling flat. I can't make those critical adjustments that I would be making if I was standing in front of you and delivering this, as I normally would. So that's a huge drawback and something you just have to give up, and you have to figure out how to roll with in the virtual experience. My hope is once we get past COVID and we come back to whatever that new normal looks like, that there's still a virtual component to conferences. Maybe it's 25% or something like that, because I think it is really critical to have those voices that are outside the local market. I was talking at SQL Saturday Salt Lake a couple weeks ago, and the organizer was talking about how valuable it's been for the SQL Saturday community to bring in speakers from Europe and from India and from, I was there from Atlanta. I wouldn't have been there on a normal scenario. So having all these other ideas come to the table is a huge benefit for conferences. And I hope that continues after we go back to an in-person environment. Again, there are benefits and drawbacks, so you just kind of have to roll with them and make them work for you. So that wraps us up. Our resource slide gives you a few nice tools that I think will be helpful. The first link is an article I wrote after my first conference talk, just things to be aware of and things that came up, and a lot of the stuff that went into our talk today, but it's kind of a nice refresher if you want to check it out. The second two are around the fear. How do you do breathing exercises to manage your anxiety? What is happening in your body during a panic attack? That awareness can help you get a grip on things and can help you succeed where your body is telling you, you need to get out of the situation now. This is bad. It's trying to self-preserve yourself. So very definitely helpful articles if you are experienced in those things. From a standpoint of putting your deck together, the next two links are very helpful for that. Graphic River provides really professional decks for $5 to $10 or for $10 to $15. So I definitely recommend checking them out. They're not the only resource out there, so I'm not trying to plug them, but they're where I've gotten my decks in the past. So they're a good resource among many you can check out. And then lastly, again, there are several free stock photo websites out there. Unsplash is the one that I use, basically where all these pictures have come from. I usually just like to give a photo credit within the slide so that we make sure that that the photographer in question gets their credit for the work that they have done. But again, there's lots of free stock photo websites out there that can really enhance your deck and make your slides have a lot more energy and a lot more impact than they would have before. So thank you all again for coming out today and checking out a nice professional development talk. I know there was some cool stuff in this time slot, so I do appreciate you sharing your time with me. Again, I can't emphasize enough that preparation and practice is key to making your first talk a success, and following up with that and making sure it's not a one and done event, and that you keep giving back and keep trying to contribute to the community that's has helped you get you to where you are. So I've listed my email, my Twitter, my LinkedIn. This slide deck will be on Twitter after the event, or actually maybe I've already posted. ASP Programmer is my handle. If you want to link up on LinkedIn, my handle is Software Architect. I love to connect with you all. So thanks again, and if there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer them at this time.
We have one question you may have hit on a little bit already. It says, do you have any tips on how to engage with the audience into your talk?
Sure. So we did mention a little bit. So one, the eye contact is very key. Two, when you feel engagement is falling off, or you just want to kind of bring them back to into the conversation, having those questions kind of prepared. Let's try to bring the audience back by reiterating something we talked about before and reinforcing that point and really bringing it back. And sometimes if you feel like you're really kind of losing the group, it's a good time to let's break into some 2-on-2 groups and do a short little exercise to kind of bring the focus back and to make sure that everybody's there with you. So just a couple little easy techniques can break the flow up a little bit, and we're all there. If you're staring at a slide deck or listening to me for an hour, invariably you're going to start to lose people at times. So doing a few of these simple things can kind of break up the monotony of things and pull your audience back in. So it can be nice. So thanks for the question.
And that is all the questions we have.
All right. Thank you.